Welcome to our deep dive into feel-good productivity.
Ah, yes.
We'll be exploring Ali Abdaal's book,
Okay.
which you chose because you're looking for ways to be more productive without burning out.
Yeah.
It's not about pushing yourself to the limit,
Right?
but about finding a sustainable way to achieve high performance by tapping into what makes you feel good.
Ah.
And trust me, some of the ideas in this book are surprising,
Oh,
like the Batman effect,
interesting.
and why sometimes the best thing you could do is absolutely nothing.
Okay, well, it's definitely a fresh perspective on productivity,
Yeah, exactly.
focusing on long-term well-being rather than short-term gains.
And speaking of fresh perspectives, Abdal starts by talking about how to energize ourselves.
Okay.
I was immediately hooked by his story about burning out as a junior doctor,
Uh-huh.
even dropping a tray of syringes on Christmas Day because he was so exhausted.
Oh, wow.
It's a stark reminder that even in high-pressure environments, pushing through exhaustion isn't sustainable.
It's a great example of how chronic stress can actually impair our performance.
Right.
Abdal connects this to a study where people under stress struggled to solve a simple problem using a box of tacks.
Okay.
They were so fixated on the obvious solution that they missed the less obvious, more creative one.
Right.
It's like getting tunnel vision when you're stressed,
Yeah.
which isn't exactly conducive to productive work.
That's such a good point.
Yeah.
It's like when you're facing a tight deadline and you get so focused on just getting it done
Yeah?
that you miss potential shortcuts
Right.
or more efficient ways of working.
And what's fascinating is that Abdal goes beyond just the psychological impact of stress.
Okay.
He delves into the science of feel-good hormones,
Uh-huh.
like dopamine, serotonin, and oxytocin.
Interesting.
These aren't just fluffy concepts.
Right.
They actually play a crucial role in regulating our mood, motivation, and focus.
So it's not just about thinking positive,
Right.
but about understanding the biochemical processes that underpin our energy levels.
Exactly.
I was amazed to learn that positive emotions can actually counteract the physical effects of stress. Abdal even mentions studies showing that watching a few minutes of a happy movie can help your heart rate recover faster after a stressful event.
It's like having an antidote to stress built right into our biology.
Right.
And this undoing hypothesis, as it's called, has huge implications for how we approach work.
Yeah.
Instead of just trying to power through stress,
Right.
we can actively cultivate positive emotions
Okay.
to fuel our productivity.
It's a much more sustainable approach, for sure.
Yeah.
And one of the most powerful energizers Abdal explores is the power of play.
Okay.
He starts with the story of the renowned physicist Richard Feynman,
Mm-hmm.
who, believe it or not, actually lost his passion for physics
Really?
after working on the Manhattan Project.
It's understandable given the weight of that project.
Right.
But what's remarkable is how Feynman rediscovered his love for physics, not through some grand scientific breakthrough, but by playfully observing a wobbling plate in the cafeteria.
Oh.
That simple act of curiosity reignited his passion for understanding the world around him.
It's a beautiful example of how playfulness can spark creativity and lead to unexpected insights.
Right.
Abdal even mentions a study where researchers used GPS trackers to monitor people's movements. They found that those who had more adventurous experiences in their daily lives reported higher levels of happiness.
Interesting.
It's like injecting a dose of adventure into your routine can actually boost your overall well-being.
So what does this mean for you?
I like that.
It might be time to reevaluate how you view your work.
Okay.
Are you approaching it as a chore,
Right.
a job to be endured?
Yeah.
Or could you find ways to make it more playful, more like a game to be enjoyed?
That's such a great question to consider.
Yeah.
Abdal suggests choosing a character to embody at work,
Okay.
drawing inspiration from archetypes like the storyteller, the creator, or the kinesthete.
Interesting.
I found this idea so intriguing.
Yeah.
He even shares his own experience of being obsessed with World of Warcraft
Oh, wow.
and how those gaining skills actually translated to his work.
It's about tapping into those playful, adventurous sides of ourselves,
Right.
even in seemingly mundane tasks.
And it reminds me of Abdal's "What would this look like if it were fun?" Post-it note strategy.
Oh, yeah.
He used this to find joy in studying biochemistry,
Interesting.
even transforming it into a musical experience by setting his notes to music.
That's brilliant.
It reminds me of that Olympic climber who said he doesn't focus on winning, but on enjoying the process of climbing itself.
Yeah.
Abdal connects this to the concept of flow,
Right.
That state of being completely absorbed in what you're doing, where time seems to disappear.
And achieving that flow state is much more likely when we're genuinely enjoying the journey.
I agree.
Not just fixated on the destination.
Right.
Of course, stress can be a major obstacle to playfulness.
Yeah.
Abdaal even mentions an experiment with rats, where those who were stressed were less likely to engage in playful behavior.
Interesting.
It highlights how crucial it is to manage stress levels if we want to unlock our playful potential.
Poor rats.
I know, right?
But it's a good reminder that we're not so different.
Yeah.
When we're stressed,
Right.
it's harder to access that sense of joy and wonder.
Exactly.
Abdaal suggests reframing failures as data points,
Okay.
valuable information that can help us learn and improve. He uses the example of Mark Rober,
Oh, yeah.
a former NASA engineer who now creates viral YouTube videos.
Yeah, I've seen those.
Rober encourages his team to experiment and fail as much as possible, seeing each failure as a step closer to success.
It's about shifting our mindset from a fear of failure to a curiosity about what we can learn from each attempt.
Exactly.
And Abdaal beautifully wraps up this section on play with a quote from the philosopher Alan Watts. "This is the real secret of life, to be completely engaged with what you are doing in the here and now. And instead of calling it work, realize it is play."
I love that.
Yeah, it's a good one.
It's such a simple but profound shift in perspective.
Right.
So instead of forcing yourself to work, ask yourself, how can I make work feel more like play?
That's a fantastic question to keep in mind.
It is.
As we move on to Abdal's second energizer, power.
No.
He starts by telling the story of Blockbuster turning down the opportunity to buy Netflix for a mere $50 million.
Oh, talk about a missed opportunity.
I know, right?
It's hard to imagine now.
Yeah.
But Blockbuster was once a giant in the entertainment industry.
Right.
It's a stark reminder that even the most successful companies can fail if they don't adapt and evolve.
Exactly.
And Abdaal uses this story to illustrate the importance of self-belief.
Okay.
He introduces the concept of self-efficacy, which is essentially believing in your ability to achieve your goals. And what's surprising is that self-efficacy isn't something you're born with.
Right.
It's a learned trait.
So anyone can boost their self-efficacy.
That's what he says.
That's encouraging.
It is.
Tell me more about how to actually do that.
Well, Abdaal outlines 4 key ways,
Okay.
based on research by psychologist Albert Bandura. The first is through mastery experiences.
Okay.
It's about setting achievable goals and building up a track record of success, even if it starts with something small.
So like proving to yourself that you can stick to a workout routine?
Exactly.
Or finally finish that presentation you've been putting off?
Precisely.
Those small wins build your confidence and demonstrate that you're capable of achieving what you set out to do.
Like that.
The second way is through vicarious experiences.
Okay.
Seeing others succeed can actually boost our own self-belief.
Interesting.
Abdaal uses the example of a study where children watched a video of someone successfully rock climbing. Those children then felt more confident about trying it themselves. Wow.
Even though they hadn't actually gained any new skills.
That's fascinating.
It's like absorbing confidence just by observing others.
It makes me think about the power of role models.
Yeah.
And how seeing someone achieve something you aspire to can make it feel more attainable.
Absolutely.
And the third way is through social persuasion.
Okay.
The power of positive feedback and encouragement from others, or even from yourself.
Right.
Remember that experiment where cyclists who used positive self-talk were able to cycle for longer?
Yeah.
It's like being your own hype team.
Sometimes we're our own worst critics.
Right.
And it's so important to remember to encourage and support ourselves.
Yeah.
Especially when facing challenges.
And finally, the fourth way is through managing our physiological and emotional states.
Okay.
This is all about recognizing that our physical and emotional well-being directly impacts our performance.
Right.
When we're stressed or anxious, it's harder to think clearly and make good decisions.
Makes total sense. I know that when I'm feeling overwhelmed, I tend to procrastinate or make careless mistakes.
Yeah.
It's like my brain just can't function properly.
Right.
But Abdaal doesn't stop there.
Oh.
He goes on to introduce the Shoshin approach,
Okay.
which is all about cultivating a beginner's mindset.
Interesting.
He uses examples from popular movies like Star Wars, Hunger Games, and Avatar, highlighting how the main characters all start their journeys as inexperienced learners
Okay.
who are open to new experiences and challenges.
It's about approaching situations with a sense of curiosity and humility.
Right.
Recognizing that there's always more to learn, no matter how experienced we become.
So it's not about pretending you don't know anything,
Right.
but about staying open to new possibilities
Exactly.
and approaching challenges with fresh eyes.
And it's linked to the protege effect.
Okay.
Which suggests that teaching others can actually deepen our own understanding.
Interesting.
When we have to explain a concept to someone else, it forces us to think about it in new ways. Right.
And identify any gaps in our knowledge.
That's so true.
Yeah.
I've definitely noticed that when I try to explain something I'm learning, it helps me solidify my own understanding.
Right.
It's like teaching becomes a form of active learning.
And this ties into Abdaal's emphasis on intrinsic versus extrinsic motivation.
Okay.
He believes that to feel truly empowered, we need to find a sense of ownership and purpose in our work.
I like that.
He tells the fascinating story of a guy who automated his entire job, Filet Offish 1066.
Oh, yeah, that guy.
You know him.
I've heard of him.
He actually got fired for being too clever.
I know.
But he did it because he was so bored and unfulfilled in his work.
Right.
He craved a sense of autonomy and control, even if it meant risking his job.
It's an extreme example.
It is.
But it highlights the importance of finding meaning and purpose in what we do.
Right.
So think about your own work.
Okay.
Is there anything you can do to increase your sense of autonomy,
Yeah.
even within the existing structure? That's a really important question to consider.
It is.
It's about finding ways to feel more engaged and invested in our work.
Right.
Even if it's not our dream job yet.
And it leads perfectly into Abdaal's third energizer,
Okay.
which is all about people. He starts by discussing this concept of relational energy, how the people we surround ourselves with can impact our mood and productivity.
It really makes you think about who you're spending your time with, doesn't it?
It does.
Abdaal even mentions a study where researchers mapped out the energy drainers and energy givers within companies.
Oh, wow.
They found that some people just naturally uplift and energize those around them,
Right.
while others,
Right.
well, let's just say they might need a little extra relational energy coaching.
Definitely.
Yeah.
It reminds me of that story Abdaal shares about Brian Eno,
Oh, yeah.
the famous musician.
Mm-hmm.
Eno had a chance encounter that led him to his scene,
Okay.
a group of artists and musicians who inspired and energized him. It highlights the importance of finding your tribe,
Right.
people who support your growth and share your passion.
And it's not just about finding individuals, but fostering a sense of teamwork and collaboration.
Okay.
Abdaal describes this as a comrade mindset versus a competitor mindset. Using the example of a study where people who were told they were working on a puzzle as part of a team were much more motivated and persistent than those who thought they were working alone.
Interesting.
It shows the power of feeling connected to something larger than yourself.
That makes so much sense.
Yeah.
I know that when I feel like I'm part of a team, I'm more likely to push myself and contribute my best effort.
And even small cues of synchronicity can boost productivity.
Okay.
Abdaal mentions the writer's hour concept,
Uh-huh.
where people gather online to write together in silence.
Interesting.
Even though they're not directly collaborating, the shared sense of purpose and the knowledge that others are working alongside them creates a sense of motivation and accountability.
It's like an invisible energy boost, just knowing that you're not alone in the struggle.
Right.
And speaking of energy boosts, Abdaal also dives into the helper's high,
Okay.
that feel-good feeling we get from helping others. Turns out there's a scientific basis for it.
Really?
Studies have shown that acts of kindness actually trigger the release of endorphins and oxytocin,
Interesting.
those feel-good hormones we talked about earlier.
So it's like a natural mood booster and a productivity enhancer all rolled into one.
Exactly.
And then there's the fascinating Benjamin Franklin effect,
Oh, yeah?
which suggests that asking someone for help can actually make them like you more.
That seems so counterintuitive.
I know, right?
But Abdaal tells the story of how Franklin turned a rival into a friend by simply asking to borrow a book.
It highlights the importance of not being afraid to ask for help,
Right.
seeing it as a gift, not a burden.
And of course, it's equally important to be proactive in offering help to others.
Yeah.
This leads to Abdaal's emphasis on over-communicating the good. He talks about research on how to respond to good news in a way that amplifies positive emotions. It's about being an active, constructive responder,
Okay.
not just saying, oh, that's nice,
Yeah.
but actively celebrating others' successes and showing genuine enthusiasm.
That's a great point.
It is.
I know I appreciate it when someone genuinely celebrates my accomplishment,
Yeah, me too.
big or small.
It definitely makes me feel more motivated and appreciated.
But over-communicating the not so good is just as crucial, wouldn't you say?
I'd say so, yeah.
Let's face it, we tend to downplay negative information,
Right.
which can lead to misunderstandings and resentment down the line.
Absolutely.
Honesty and transparency are essential for building strong relationships,
Yes.
both personally and professionally.
Right.
Abdal provides some great tips on how to communicate bad news effectively.
Okay.
It's all about being clear and direct, while also being empathetic and respectful.
So we've covered energize and explored how to tap into play, power, and people to boost our mood and motivation. But what happens when those energizers are blocked?
Well, that's exactly what we'll uncover in the next part of our deep dive,
Okay.
where we'll tackle the 3 big blockers to feel-good productivity,
Okay, I'm intrigued.
clarity, courage, and getting started.
Stay tuned.
So we've explored how to energize our productivity by tapping into play, power, and people. But now, let's face it, even with the best intentions, there are always those pesky obstacles that get in the way.
Right, and Ali Abdaal doesn't shy away from those in the unblocked section of his book. He starts with this rather intense story about a guy who asks a guru for advice on how to get rich, and the guru basically tries to drown him.
It's definitely a dramatic way to illustrate a point.
It is.
But that's the essence of the unblock method, which emphasizes confronting the negative emotions holding us back.
Okay.
It's about understanding those feelings, not just trying to power through them.
It's like that analogy Abdal uses, having a pebble in your shoe as you try to run to your friend's house for dinner. You can try to ignore it,
Right.
but it's going to slow you down and make the whole experience less enjoyable. The best solution is to stop and remove the pebble.
Exactly. And the first pebble Abdal helps us remove is clarity. He argues that procrastination often stems from feeling confused or uncertain about what we should actually be doing.
Yeah.
We might have a vague idea of what we want to achieve, but without clear goals and action steps, it's easy to get stuck in a cycle of overwhelm and inaction.
He introduces this concept of commander's intent, which comes from military strategy.
Right.
It's about focusing on the overall objective of a mission, even if individual plans go awry. Abdal uses the example of the D-Day landings during World War II. The overall goal was to liberate Europe, even if specific units faced unexpected challenges or setbacks.
It's a great illustration of how having a clear why, that overarching purpose, can help you stay focused and adaptable even in chaotic situations. So think about your current project or goal.
Okay.
What's the commander's intent behind it? What's the ultimate outcome you're striving for? Understanding that bigger purpose can help you make decisions and prioritize tasks more effectively.
It's like having a compass to guide you through the inevitable twists and turns of any project. And to help us figure out our commander's intent, Abdal suggests adapting the 5 whys technique.
It's that classic questioning method.
I know it well.
But instead of using it to annoy our parents, we can apply it to our work.
Right.
By repeatedly asking why, we can peel back the layers of a task and uncover its deeper purpose. It helps us determine whether a task is truly aligned with our goals or just something we feel obligated to do.
I love that. It's like a mini self-discovery exercise for your to-do list. But even with a clear why, we still need concrete goals and action steps, which is where Abdal's approach to goal setting comes in. And I have to say, he really challenges the traditional view of SMART goals, arguing that they can actually backfire and lead to burnout.
Yeah, while SMART goals, those that are specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-bound, can be helpful, they can also create a narrow focus on the outcome.
Right.
This can make us overly attached to achieving a specific result, even if the process itself becomes draining or demotivating.
It's like that saying, you miss 100% of the shots you don't take. But what if taking the shot makes you miserable? What if the process of achieving that goal sucks all the joy out of it? Abdal suggests an alternative. NICE goals.
I love that acronym.
Me too.
NICE goals are those that are near-term, input-based, controllable, and energizing.
Perfect.
Instead of focusing on a distant, potentially overwhelming outcome, NICE goals emphasize taking small, actionable steps that are within your control and that you can actually enjoy.
It's a much more sustainable and empowering approach. So let's break down those elements a bit. Near term means focusing on what you can achieve this week, not months from now.
Exactly. It's about breaking down those big, daunting goals into smaller, more manageable chunks. And input-based means focusing on the actions you can control, like dedicating 30 minutes each day to writing, rather than the outcome of finishing an entire book.
It's about focusing on the process, not just the product. Controllable is about choosing goals that are within your sphere of influence, not dependent on external factors. And energizing means choosing goals that you're actually excited about, that light you up. It's about aligning your goals with your values and passions.
He also highlights the importance of implementation intentions, which are like if X then Y statements that help us turn our intentions into actions. It's about creating specific triggers to prompt desired behaviors. Abdaal uses the example of a study where people who set an intention to walk more actually did so simply by linking it to a daily habit like brushing their teeth.
It's such a simple but effective hack. It's like creating a mental shortcut that bypasses our tendency to overthink or procrastinate. Speaking of hacks, Abdel also talks about time blocking and the ideal week exercise. It's not about rigidly scheduling every minute of your day, but about ensuring that you're making time for the things that matter most.
It's about being intentional with your time and energy rather than letting them get sucked away by urgent but unimportant tasks.
Yeah.
So once you have that clarity about your why, your goals, and your schedule, you've removed that first pebble, right?
Right. But Abdal warns us that there's often another pebble lurking nearby, and that's courage. He acknowledges that fear can be a powerful blocker, even more so than we realize. It can manifest as fear of rejection, fear of failure, or fear of not being good enough.
Right.
And it can prevent us from taking action even when we know what we need to do.
He talks about the amygdala hijack, which is basically our primal brain taking over when it perceives a threat, even if that threat isn't real or rational. Yeah. It's like our inner alarm system going haywire, flooding us with stress hormones and making it hard to think clearly.
It's like that feeling of your heart racing and your palms sweating when you have to give a presentation or ask someone out on a date. It's our body's natural fight or flight response kicking in, even though we're not actually in any danger.
Exactly. And Abdal argues that the first step to overcoming fear is simply identifying it.
Okay.
He provides some great questions to ask yourself.
Oh, like what?
What am I afraid of? What's the worst that could happen? What evidence do I have to support this fear? It's about getting curious about those underlying anxieties that are driving our behavior.
I love those questions. It's about shining a light on our fears, bringing them out into the open where we can examine them more objectively. Abdal also suggests the 1-0-10-10 rule as a way to gain perspective on our fears. It's about asking yourself how you'll feel about the situation in 10 minutes, 10 months, and 10 years.
It's like zooming out and realizing that even the scariest situations might not seem so big a deal in the grand scheme of things. It can help us detach from the immediacy of our fear and see things in a more balanced light.
He then delves into the confidence equation, reminding us that self-doubt often stems from an imbalance between our perceived ability and the perceived difficulty of the task at hand. It's about accurately assessing both our skills and the challenge we're facing.
And remember those self-efficacy techniques we discussed earlier.
Yeah.
They're just as relevant here for combating self-doubt. Abdal also provides some additional practical tips, like starting small, focusing on progress, and seeking feedback.
I love that he brings up Adele's story.
Oh, yeah.
She apparently created an alter ego, Sasha Carter, to help her overcome stage fright.
Wow.
It's a perfect example of the Batman effect, which suggests that embodying a confident persona can actually boost our performance.
It's fascinating, isn't it? Like we can tap into hidden reserves of courage and confidence just by pretending to be someone else. It's like giving ourselves permission to be bolder and braver than we might feel in our everyday selves.
I'm definitely going to try channeling my inner superhero next time I'm feeling intimidated. And this connects to the fear of being seen, that spotlight effect, where we think everyone is judging our every move. Abdal points out that most people are way too preoccupied with their own lives to even notice our mistakes.
Isn't that liberating? It's like realizing that maybe no one cares as much as we think they do. It frees us up to take risks and embrace imperfection.
So we've tackled uncertainty and fear, but Abdal reminds us there's often one more pebble in our shoe: inertia. That resistance to simply getting started, even when we know what we need to do.
It's like Newton's first law of motion. Objects at rest tend to stay at rest. Abdal uses that shopping trolley experiment to show how small changes in our environment can make a big difference.
Right.
Remember those supermarkets that added green inlays to their shopping trolleys? It actually increased vegetable purchases.
It's incredible how subtle cues can influence our behavior. It's all about reducing friction and making desired actions easier. It reminds me of Abdal's 5-minute rule, committing to just 5 minutes of work on a daunting task. You shared that you often end up working longer than 5 minutes once you actually get started. It's like tricking your brain into taking action.
It's a brilliant strategy. That initial commitment can break down that barrier of resistance, and then once you're in motion, it's often easier to keep going.
Abdal then dives into procrastination expert Tim Peichel's research, highlighting the common reasons we put things off. Task aversiveness, we simply avoid tasks we find unpleasant. Fear of failure, we're afraid of messing up or not meeting expectations. And indecision, we get stuck in analysis paralysis, overthinking and overplanning.
Right, he provides some practical strategies to address these blocks. Reframing the task by focusing on the positive aspects, breaking it down into smaller, more manageable chunks, or simply making a decision and sticking to it.
And for data-driven folks like myself, he mentions Brandon Sanderson, the fantasy author who's known for his incredibly prolific output. Sanderson tracks his daily word count religiously, focusing on consistent progress even when he doesn't feel inspired. It's the power of micro-achievements, those small wins that add up over time.
I find that so inspiring. It's a reminder that consistency is key, even when motivation is fickle. And for those who thrive on social support, Abda suggests accountability partnerships as a way to leverage external motivation and stay on track. It's like having a workout buddy for all areas of your life. He provides tips on setting up an effective partnership, like finding the right person who will challenge and support you, defining clear expectations, and setting specific goals and deadlines.
So we've explored how to unblock our productivity by addressing those sneaky pebbles of uncertainty, fear, and inertia. But what about maintaining that energy over the long haul? How do we ensure that our productivity is sustainable and doesn't lead to burnout?
That's a great question, and that's exactly what we'll be diving into in the next part of our deep dive. The sustain section of the book, which focuses on conserving, recharging, and aligning our energy.
So we've explored how to energize ourselves and overcome those pesky blockers that get in the way of our productivity. Now let's talk about how to sustain that energy over the long term, how to avoid burnout, and make this approach a way of life.
Right. That's a crucial aspect of Abdal's approach.
Okay.
He dedicates the final section of the book to sustain, focusing on 3 key strategies.
Okay.
Conserving our energy, recharging our batteries,
Right.
and aligning our actions with our values and purpose.
And he starts with conserve,
Yeah.
which might seem counterintuitive after all that talk about embracing play and power.
Right.
But it makes sense when you consider that even positive activities can be draining if we overcommit or try to do too much at once.
Exactly.
Oh, okay.
Abdal challenges the typical view of burnout, which often focuses solely on overwork. He actually shares his own experience of burning out.
Oh.
Even though he wasn't working crazy hours.
Interesting.
It was more about feeling depleted, cynical, and ineffective.
That's so relatable.
Yeah.
I've definitely felt those symptoms even when I wasn't technically overworked.
Right.
It's more about a feeling of overwhelm and a sense that you're not making meaningful progress.
Exactly.
Okay.
And Abdal emphasizes that this aligns with the World Health Organization's definition of burnout,
Right.
which highlights the emotional and mental aspects rather than just focusing on the number of hours worked.
So even if you're not in a high-stress job,
Yeah.
you can still experience burnout if you're not careful.
Absolutely.
Abdal identifies overcommitting as one of the biggest contributors to burnout.
Yeah.
Even when we have control over our schedules,
Right.
we can still spread ourselves too thin by saying yes to too many things.
And to combat this, he introduces the concept of the energy investment portfolio. It's a simple but powerful tool for visualizing how we're spending our precious time and energy. Abdal suggests creating 2 lists, a dream list for all those aspirations and ideas we have for the future, and an active investments list for the projects we're currently pouring our energy into.
I love that analogy.
Yeah, it's a good one.
It's like we're managing our energy like a financial portfolio,
Right.
carefully choosing where to invest our resources for the greatest return.
Precisely. And it highlights the importance of being selective about what we commit to. We can't do everything at once.
Which leads to Abdal's emphasis on the power of saying no.
Ah, yes.
It's about recognizing that every yes to one thing is a no to something else. He even references Derek Sivers' hell yeah or no rule.
Oh, yeah, that's one of my favorite takeaways from the book. If a commitment doesn't elicit a resounding hell yeah from you,
Right.
it's a no. It's such a simple but effective way to filter out those obligations that drain our energy and distract us from our true priorities.
It's about being more intentional with our commitments.
Right.
Choosing to focus on those things that truly light us up. Abdaal also shares Juliet Funt's concept of the 6-week trap, which is that tendency to look at our calendars 6 weeks out and think, oh, I have so much free time, I can totally take on that extra project.
It's so true. We often overestimate our future capacity,
I do that all the time.
forgetting that those 6 weeks will inevitably fill up with unexpected tasks and commitments. It's a reminder to protect our future selves from overcommitment.
And Abdaal provides some practical tips for saying no gracefully. It's about expressing gratitude for the offer, being clear and concise in your refusal, and avoiding over-explaining or apologizing.
He then tackles the myth of multitasking,
Right.
highlighting the fact that our brains are simply not wired to focus on multiple tasks effectively.
I know I can't do it.
He cites a study where participants who tried to switch between tasks actually performed worse and experienced more stress.
It's like trying to juggle flaming torches while riding a unicycle and solving a Rubik's Cube. It's just not going to end well.
Yeah.
And Abdaal also introduces the idea of failing with abandon, which is basically getting so caught up in distractions that we completely lose track of our goals.
Yeah, like falling down a social media rabbit hole
Oh, yeah.
and emerging hours later,
Right.
wondering where the time went. But he's not advocating for eliminating distractions entirely. He encourages us to reframe our relationship with distractions,
Okay.
recognizing that they're inevitable,
Mm-hmm.
but we can learn to manage them.
It's about getting back on track when we inevitably get sidetracked
Exactly.
and not beating ourselves up about it.
Right.
And Abdaal reminds us that taking breaks is not a sign of weakness,
Right.
but a necessity for sustaining our energy and focus.
He emphasizes that breaks aren't a reward, but a strategic investment in our productivity. He even suggests scheduling breaks into our calendars like we would any other important meeting.
I love that idea.
Yeah, it's a good one.
It takes the guilt out of taking breaks and makes it more likely that we'll actually prioritize rest and rejuvenation.
And he also talks about incorporating energizing distractions into our day.
Oh, yeah.
These are activities that provide a mental break and recharge our batteries, like listening to music, taking a walk in nature,
Okay.
or having a quick chat with a friend.
It reminds me of Thich Nhat Hanh's concept of the awakening bell,
Yeah.
using a simple sound like a bell or a timer to bring us back to the present moment and break the cycle of mindlessly scrolling or working. So we've covered being mindful of our commitments, managing distractions, and taking breaks. But what about actively recharging our energy? How do we replenish those depleted reserves?
Well, that's where recharge comes in.
Yeah.
Abdaal starts by acknowledging that we live in a world that's constantly demanding our attention, making it harder than ever to truly rest and recharge.
Yeah.
He uses the anecdote about the Oxford English Dictionary struggling to choose a single word to represent 2020, highlighting how overwhelming and draining that year was for many people.
It's a powerful reminder that rest is not a luxury. It's a necessity for our physical, mental, and emotional well-being.
And he emphasizes the importance of choosing activities that truly recharge us, rather than engaging in passive activities that might seem restful but actually drain our energy.
Like endless scrolling through social media or binge-watching TV shows.
Exactly.
It's about finding activities that nourish our souls and replenish our energy reserves.
Yeah.
And one of the biggest rechargers Abdaal explores is creativity. He shares that studies have shown that engaging in creative activities can reduce stress and anxiety.
Right.
That makes sense. I know I always feel more energized and alive when I'm working on a creative project. It's like a different part of my brain comes alive.
And he uses the acronym CALL-M to describe the 4 key elements of creative recharging: competence, autonomy, liberty, and mindlessness.
I love how he breaks it down like that.
Yeah.
So competence is about feeling capable and skilled at something.
Right.
Autonomy is about having control over our creative choices.
Yeah.
Liberty is about having mental freedom from our usual worries and responsibilities. And mindlessness is about getting lost in the flow of the activity.
Exactly. It's about finding those activities that allow us to tap into those 4 elements.
Right.
And experience that sense of flow and creative rejuvenation. He provides examples like painting, playing music, gardening, writing, building something, or even just taking on a creative project for fun. And he shares those anecdotes about George W. Bush and King Charles both having painting hobbies, emphasizing that creative pursuits are beneficial even if we're not aiming for professional level mastery. It's about the joy of the process itself.
That's a great point. We often put so much pressure on ourselves to be good at something that we forget to simply enjoy the process of creating.
And along with creative pursuits, Abdaal highlights the restorative power of nature. He mentions a study where hospital patients who had a view of nature actually recovered faster.
Wow.
And experienced less pain.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
It reminds me of that feeling of peace and tranquility I get when I'm walking in the woods or sitting by the ocean. Like nature has this innate ability to soothe our souls and calm our minds.
And he encourages us to incorporate micro-restorative experiences into our daily routines, even if it's just for a few minutes. Simple things like taking a walk in a park, listening to nature sounds, or adding plants to our workspaces can have a significant impact on our well-being.
It's about finding those little pockets of nature that we can access throughout our day, even if we live in a busy city.
And Abdaal doesn't stop there.
Oh.
He also explores the benefits of mindless recharging.
Okay.
Those activities that don't require intense concentration,
Right.
but allow our minds to wander and make connections.
I have to admit, I'm a bit skeptical about the idea of mindless activities being restorative.
Yeah, I get that.
I tend to think of those as wasting time.
That's a common misconception, but Abdaal explains how these activities actually engage our default mode network,
Oh.
which is the part of our brain that's active when we're not focused on a specific task. It's during these mindless moments that we often have our most creative breakthroughs and insightful realizations.
So it's not about zoning out in front of the TV,
Right.
but about engaging in activities that allow our minds to wander freely and make new connections.
Exactly. And Abdaal shares the story of a hiker who rediscovered her love of hiking by shifting her focus from external goals, like completing a certain number of miles, to the intrinsic enjoyment of the experience itself. It's about finding meaning and purpose, even in activities that might not seem inherently exciting.
That's a great example.
Yeah.
I think it's easy to get caught up in achieving goals and forget to simply enjoy the journey.
He introduces the concept of the relative autonomy continuum,
Okay.
which outlines different types of motivation, from external rewards to intrinsic enjoyment. The key takeaway is that even activities that are not intrinsically motivating can be energizing if we align them with our values and goals.
So even if an activity isn't something we naturally enjoy, it can still be energizing if we connect it to a deeper sense of purpose.
Precisely. And he provides examples of mindless recharging activities like spending time with loved ones, listening to music, reading for pleasure, or taking a relaxing bath.
Those all sound wonderfully restorative. So we've covered conserving our energy and recharging our batteries. But what about ensuring that our energy is directed towards what truly matters? How do we align our actions with our values and purpose?
That's the final piece of the sustain puzzle.
Okay.
Abdaal starts with a powerful exercise called the eulogy method,
Right.
where he encourages us to imagine it's our own funeral and reflect on what we want people to say about our lives.
That's a bit morbid, but I can see how it would force you to confront what's truly important to you.
He shares the story of Lei Pen, who wrote her own obituary as a transformative exercise that helped her clarify her values and priorities. It's about reflecting on our legacy and identifying the impact we want to make on the world.
And to help us design our lives with intention, he introduces Bill Burnett's Odyssey plan, which involves creating 3 different versions of our future selves.
It's a fascinating exercise. The first version is the life you're on track for, your current trajectory if you continue on your current path. The second is the life you'd live if money were no object, exploring your ideal life without financial constraints. And the third is the life you'd live if you weren't afraid, embracing your most daring and fulfilling life without letting fear hold you back.
It's like a choose-your-own-adventure for your life. I love that. And Abdaal then talks about the power of values affirmation, citing a study where female physics students who wrote about their values actually performed better in their classes.
Right. It highlights the importance of connecting our actions to our deeper sense of purpose.
He also suggests using the Wheel of Life exercise, which involves identifying 10 key areas of life, such as work, relationships, health, and personal growth, and rating your current satisfaction in each area. It helps you visualize your ideal state for each area and create a plan to bridge the gap.
And for those who need a little extra motivation, he introduces the 12-month celebration exercise, where you imagine it's a year from now and you're celebrating your accomplishments with a friend.
It's a way to connect with our future selves and create a vision to work towards.
Exactly. And he ties this to research on short-term horizons, emphasizing that breaking down long-term goals into daily actions makes them more achievable. He provides a simple framework for daily planning. Choose 3 actions that align with your 12-month celebration vision, focus on making progress, and celebrate your wins along the way.
It's about taking consistent action towards what matters, even if it's just small steps.
And finally, Abdal encourages us to approach life with a curious and experimental mindset, embracing the idea of life experiments.
So it's about identifying a problem or area for improvement, forming a hypothesis about a potential solution, testing it out, and observing the results.
Exactly.
Okay.
He uses examples of people who made significant life changes by simply trying new things and seeing what worked. It's about treating life as an ongoing learning process where failure is just another data point.
That's a great way to look at it. So we've explored how to sustain our energy by conserving it, recharging it, and aligning it with our values and purpose. It's a holistic approach to productivity that goes beyond just getting things done. It's about creating a life that feels good.
Yeah.
Not just a to-do list that's completed.
Absolutely. And that brings us to the end of our deep dive into Ali Abdaal's feel-good productivity. What stood out to you the most from this exploration?
Honestly, I think the biggest takeaway for me is the emphasis on how our emotions directly impact our productivity. It's not about ignoring or suppressing those feelings, but about understanding them and using them as fuel for action. It's about creating a work-life balance that's sustainable, enjoyable, and aligned with our values.
That's a fantastic insight. And remember, for those who want to delve deeper into this approach, Abdal offers a free gift on his website.
Oh, yeah, that's right. You can find that at www.feelgoodproductivity.com/gift.
Perfect.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. We hope you've gained some valuable tools to boost your own feel-good productivity.
Until next time, keep exploring, keep experimenting, and keep aligning your actions with what truly matters to you.